Hello everyone and welcome to this month's webinar and project for Total Quilter and My Decorative Quilter. This month's project is an applique tissue holder. It was designed for you by Rita Gizzard and presented by myself, Mark Garretts. I'm a national R&K educator. As I always like to do before we get started with the construction and the software details, I like to show you a picture of what the finished project is going to look like. As you can see, this is a tissue holder. It gets folded over and sewn together. The outside has an applique of a bird, and the inside has the pocket to hold the tissues. So let's go ahead and get started with the software portion of today's project. We've included instructions here in this video for Total Quilter. If you have My Decorative Quilter, then you will want to follow the software instructions that you downloaded with the project printed materials. But again, what we're going to be covering here in this video are the Total Quilter instructions. So what you want to do is go ahead and open Total Quilter, and if you haven't done it already, you want to come up here to the new page icon and click it to create a new page. You'll get something that looks like this, but if it doesn't look exactly like this, then don't worry, we're going to get that set up right now. So to do that, what I want you to do is come up to the ruler bar and put your mouse over the top. Now this is called hovering the mouse, so that's what I mean when I say hover. Just let it float over something without clicking anything. And in today's project, we're going to be using three different types of clicks. We're going to be using a regular left click. We're going to be using a right click, which means right clicking on the mouse. And we're also going to be using a special kind of click called a control click. And that means that you're going to hold down the control key on your keyboard while simultaneously pressing the left mouse button. So today, if I just say click, that means a left click. If I want you to right click or control click, I will say that explicitly. So hover over the top ruler here and right click on it to bring up this little dialog box. And this is where we'll get our page and grid settings set up. So what you want is inches checked, you want show grid checked, you want snap to grid checked, and these rest of them can be unchecked. Snap to guidelines and snap to anchors is unchecked for now. And lastly, come down here to grid settings and click that, and this will bring up your grid settings. And what you want to do is you want to set your horizontal and your vertical both to 1/4 of an inch, so 0.25 here. And you want your grid major to be 13, and for your horizontal, and your vertical to be 11. And then the last thing you want to do is you want to come down here to the style. For this project, we're going to change our normal style, which is dashed lines, to solid lines. And you're going to do that by clicking right here. And this is just a fun little thing to show you the difference in the grid style. It really doesn't matter for the project. If you want to prefer to leave it as dashed lines, you can. But I'm just going to go ahead and click OK to lock those changes in. And now you can see that my grid has changed to solid lines. The next thing we're going to do is come down here and select our thread chart. And we're going to come down here to this bottom left icon, which is the select thread chart, and you hover over it, you can see that it says that. Go ahead and click it, and what you want to do is select Floriani Cotton from this chart. Now, we're going to use this Floriani Cotton thread chart simply because it just has a very few colors in it, not because we actually want you to stitch this project out with that particular thread. We're just using it as a way to not have to scroll through a whole bunch of colors. So go ahead and click Floriani Cotton, and this is the Floriani Cotton thread chart down here. And as you can see, it just has a few colors. Next thing you want to do is adjust your zoom up here in the zoom box to make sure that you can see these 4 major grid squares here. So you can see that I can see these 4 here. I could actually zoom in a little bit more. Let me see if I go to now if I go to 75%, that'll zoom out. You might have to do that, but at 100% on my screen, I can see these 4 nice and big here. So that's what you want. You want to be able to see these 4 major grid squares here defined by the purple lines. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to load in our applique piece, and we're going to modify it. And to do that, we're going to use one of the built-in quilt blocks and use part of it as an applique. And we're going to do that by coming up here to this icon right here, which is our artwork blocks, and click that. And when we do that, you'll have a variety of artwork blocks to choose from. You'll probably default to a different directory, but what you want to do is come here to the picture blocks folder, and then you want to find the one that's called Pieced Bird, and it is right here. And when you click it, it will bring it in to the design window. So there's your Pieced Bird. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to eliminate the parts of the bird that we don't actually need, because this was intended to be a quilt block, and we're just actually going to use these pieces here in the center as an applique. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to click on the legs right here. So this is in the center of our sequence view here. We're going to come down to the very bottom, and we are going to hold down the control key on our keyboard and control click the blue background. And once you've done that, we're going to delete these two. There's several different ways you can do it, but we're going to do it by coming up here to our scissors icon, our cut icon, and click that, and it will eliminate those pieces for us. So once you've done that, the beak should remain selected. And now what we're going to do is we're actually going to select the whole bird. And there's lots of different ways you can do that. I'm just going to do it by coming over here and clicking all items, and that will select the bird. You also could have done it by having that beak selected and coming in and control clicking all of the items in the bird, or you could do it by, when the beak was selected, shift clicking the top item, and that would also have selected the entire bird. So any way you want to do that, you want to select the entire bird. And what we're going to do now is come up to our transform tab here, and we are going to change the size of the bird. We're going to do that by reducing it by a percentage amount rather than an actual size. And you want to make sure that maintain aspect ratio is checked here. And what we're going to do is change either the height or the width to 70%. So I'm going to type over, and when you see when I do that, it changes one to match the other because maintain aspect ratio is checked. If I click apply, it's going to make our bird a little bit smaller. Then what we want to do is we want to rotate it 90 degrees to the right. So there's two different ways you could do that. You can use this rotate right 90 degree icon, or you can do 2 clicks of the 45. So I'll do the rotate 90 once. Then the last thing we need to do is center this up to our screen, and the way we're going to do that is come here to our alignment icon and click it, and the next to last icon here is centered to the rulers. So if I click that, it's going to center it up here in our rulers. Now what we want to do is come over here to our sequence view and start modifying the parts of this. Before I do that, I'm going to zoom in so that you can see this a little better. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom actually to 125%. So I'm going to type that in, and now I can still see my 4 grid lines out here, but I can see my bird a little bit better. So that's an optimal size for my screen. You're going to want to find the one that works for you and remember what it is. So we're going to come over here to our sequence view, and we are going to select the red wing here. So this is the red wing, and we're going to come over to our left hand toolbar and click our shape tool, because what we're going to do is we're going to modify the shape of this wing. Originally this was designed to be a pieced block design, but we're going to change it to an applique, obviously. So we can go ahead and make it a little bit rounded, which you can do with an applique, but you can't do with a pieced block. So what we're going to do is come here to this blue node right here at the top of the wing, and it's the top if you're looking at it with the bird right side up. And you can see as I get close to it, the little blue circle appears by my cursor telling me I'm close enough now to that node that if I click on it, I will get some actions on that particular node. So if I click it, I will select it, and then if I right click with it selected, I'll get a little pop-up menu, and I have some options here. And then what we're going to do is come down here to the smooth option. So this changes the type of point or curve it is from a line, which is what it was, a straight line point, to a smooth point, and that is going to have the effect of rounding it out. We're going to repeat that with this one here, but this time we're going to use a little bit different procedure. Instead of left clicking and then right clicking, I can simply right click on it and click smooth, and it will round that one out. So now what we want to do is come over to our sequence view and click on the blue body to select it. And once again, we're going to modify some of those points. So to do that, we're going to come here back to our shape tool. And the first thing we want to do is we want to delete some points that we don't need. So the very first one we're going to delete is this one right here by the bottom. And in the printed directions, you'll see a red arrow pointing to it. So what you want to do is right click on it and this time select delete point, and it's going to delete that extraneous point. And there's some extra points along here on this line that we don't actually need. So what we want to do is delete that point, that point, that point, that point, all 5 of those points. We could do that individually just like we did for this point over here, but I'm going to show you a different shortcut, which is that if you drag a box around them while you are in shape mode, you will select all 5 of those points. And now if I right click, I can do it all at once. So I'm going to click delete points, and I've deleted all those points in between this point and this point. Now the last thing we need to do is smooth some of these out. So what we're going to do is smooth out, first of all, this point right here. So I'm going to right click on it and click smooth. And I want to do these 3 points here the same way. So I'm going to do them one at a time. So I'm going to click smooth. And I'm doing this so you can see as I do that, you can see how it curves them around. And let me just do the same thing with that one. So now we've got a more smooth looking bird here. So the next thing we want to do is we are going to convert this into an Applique block. In order to do that, we have to switch into our Applique block mode. First thing we need to do is create the Applique block. And we do that by coming up here to this icon right here, which is create Applique block. But before we do that, we need to do one other important thing, and that is come up to our ruler bar, hover over it, and right click. We want to turn on something called snap to anchors. So we are going to turn on snap to anchors, and all of these little blue dots, those are anchors. Now when we draw our Applique lines, we can draw them along these same lines by using that snap to anchors tool, and it gives us a very precise way of creating that outline. So we're going to do that by first of all coming up here to our create Applique block tool and click it. And when I do that, you'll see that my cursor changes into a rectangle with a crosshair by it. That rectangle is telling us that it's time to draw the outline of our block, and that's either a square or a rectangle. And we're going to use these grid lines to create the size of that block, the exact size. And since we have snap to grid turned on, if I get close to any of these grid line intersections, it'll automatically snap to it. So it allows me to draw it very precisely without having to be a very precise drawer. So I'm going to get up here and I'm going to click and I'm going to drag down to the bottom over here, down to this corner, and I'm going to let off the mouse, and that's going to create our outline. You can't see it real well because it's right on top of our major grid lines, but that's okay. We know it's there. And you'll see that now my cursor is a single crosshair and the icon for the rectangle is gone. And that tells us it's now time to draw our bisecting lines for our Applique. And normally what we do is we bisect up a quilt block. What we're going to do in this one is we're just going to draw some lines in the middle here to create the applique shape for our bird. So we're going to come up here, we're going to start here, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to draw all the way around the bird to kind of create the main outline. And we're going to be doing a sequence of regular clicks or left clicks and control clicks to do this. And when we control click, we're going to be putting in a curved point. And as we go through this, I will tell you where to click what type of click. But in the printed instructions, you'll see that there's red arrows by the points where you need to control click. So we're going to start off with a regular click here. We're going to work our way clockwise around the bird. This first one is going to be a control click. So I'm going to click that one. Then this is a normal click. And then we have another control click here and a regular click here, a regular click here, a regular click here. You can see it's trying to make that line straight right now, but if we control click right here, it'll curve that up, see that? And then the last one we're going to do is come all the way back up to the beginning. There's no need to click on this one. We'll just come back up to the beginning and do a left click. Then the way we tell it we're done with these bisecting lines is we need to press enter on our keyboard. So I'm going to, on my keyboard, press enter. You can't see me doing it, but I've just done that. Now we're going to draw our second line, and that's going to be the top of this wing here. So we're going to start out with a regular click here on that node. Then we're going to control click all the rest of them. So 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to press enter. Tell it I'm done with that one. The last one we need to do is just come across this beak here to bisect this one up. So these are just going to be 2 regular left clicks here and here, followed by an enter. We're not going to bother with the eye, so we're going to ignore that. And when I'm done with all my bisecting lines, which I am, in order to tell the software I'm done, I right click on the mouse, and you can see now it's created our Applique block with all of our lines where our bird is. So what we need to do now is we need to come and we need to color in our fabric choices here so that when we create our applique block, it knows how to cut the applique pieces correctly for this bird. So the way we do that is with this special selection tool right here called our Applique Object Selection Tool. This allows us to either select a block area like we're going to do now, or the lines of the block, which we'll do in a second. So if you click it, and you come to an area, you can start to click in here and create the various parts of the block. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to click on this wing area, so anywhere in the wing, and you can see now I've got that selected. We're going to assign a color to it, and we're going to use this red that's already in the design here. So come down to this red number 3 and click it, and when you do that, it's got 2 choices. Either take it out, which we don't want to do, or assign it to the fabric color. So we're going to assign it to the fabric color, so we're going to click that, and now we've got the red wing. We're going to follow that with the body, so we're going to come here and click the body. This one wants to be a blue, so we're going to come to this blue that's in the design, click it, and click fabric color one more time. Last thing we want to do is our beak, which is orange. We're going to come here, hover over the orange, click it, click fabric color, and now we've got our 4 colors. Now what we need to do is we need to assign some motif stitches to the lines. So it doesn't matter which line you click first. I'm going to click up here to select the outline of the bird, and we need to select the other 2. So I'm going to hold down Control now and click the other 2 so that we can assign our lines all at once. Okay, so now I've got all my lines selected, and we're going to assign a motif to it by coming down here to our motif run, one click, and click it, and that's going to put in the default of those crosshairs. But what we want to do is we want to change this to a more decorative look. So we're going to change it to pattern number 216, which is this one right here, and we want to change our pattern size to 6 to make it a little bit bigger, and click apply, and that is going to put in our decorative motif stitch here, which is going to give our quilt block a nice look, our applique a nice look, as well as tack the fabrics down. So the next thing we need to do is we are going to come over to our sequence view and select everything. So we're going to select all items, and then what we're going to do is we're going to rotate this back 90 degrees. So what we're going to do is come over here to our rotate left 90 degree icon and click it, and now you can see, hey, our bird's starting to look right side up here. So the last thing we need to do is we need to export this block as an applique block, and the way we do that is come over here to our sequence view and select just the applique block portion, or the applique block portion here, which is this last item right here. And we're going to come up here to our Applique export icons. We have 3 choices: export a regular applique block, a faux piecing block, or the one we're going to do for this particular design, an applique block. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And what's going on here is you've got a project name. So this is the folder we want to put it in, the name of the folder. Here's where it's going to go. Now what we want to do is we want to call this our applique tissue holder, So I'm going to type that in here, Applique, if I can actually hit the right keys on the keyboard, tissue holder. So that's going to give it this folder name inside this folder. You can change this if you want, but I like to leave it at the default folder here. You're going to leave your seam allowance at 1/4 inch. You want to make sure you generate stitch files. Here in this file format, you want to choose the format for the machine that you have, and you can do that by clicking the down arrow here. I'm going to go ahead and leave it on Baby Lock Brother Multi-Needle because that's what I have. You do want to click as digitized, and if you're going to cut this applique out using a digital cutter, you want to have cut files checked, and then you also want to have either SVG for most cutters or FCM for a Brother Scan and Cut. And the last thing you need to worry about is right here for the background fabric. You want to click that and make sure that the gray one is checked. If it isn't, go ahead and check it. These are the other colors. What this is telling us in an applique block is that instead of cutting out all the pieces like we would for a normal applique quilt block, instead it's going to leave this background fabric as a big contiguous piece and cut out the orange, blue, and red as our applique pieces, which is exactly what we want. And so from that point on, you can go ahead and click export. If you want to preview it for manual cutting, you can do that by checking manual cutting and click preview. But I'm just going to go ahead and export that because I have a digital cutter, and you can see it's going to put all the files that we need here in the directory that we assigned it under Floriani Designs Appliquilt and Applique Tissue Holder. All right, so here's all the files that you need, all your cutting files and everything. So I'm going to head and close that. And the next thing we need to do is we need to actually modify the block that got exported to turn this from a normal quilt block into a quilt in the hoop project, which is what this is going to be. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the open design icon, and if it didn't come right to it, you want to navigate back to your applique tissue holder folder that you just created in the previous step. You want to find your stitches file, and this will change based on what machine format you gave it, but it should say applique tissue holder stitches and then have a extension here. You can see mine's the PES. So you want to go ahead and click that and click open, and that's going to bring in the stitch file for that particular block. The next thing we need to do is come over to our sequence view. We're going to eliminate some of the things that we would normally want for a quilt block, but we don't need for an in the hoop project. So the first thing we're going to do is click this trimming guideline here. We don't actually need that, so we're going to delete that. Again, you can do that by clicking the cut icon up here. You can right click on it and say delete, or you can press the delete key on the keyboard. So I'll use that right click there. So we've deleted that very first item. Now what we want to do is click on the last item in our sequence view, which is our outline stitch here, and we need some more of those. We're going to convert those into tack down stitches in the beginning for our batting and our fabric. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make a copy of it. So we're going to come up here to our copy icon and click it. And then we're going to actually make 2 copies by clicking the paste icon once and twice. And you can see here now we have 3 run stitches. We're going to take 2 of these and put them up at the front. So you want to, this last one should be selected. So what you want to do is hold down Control and click the next to last one. Then you want to click and drag them up so that all items is highlighted, and let off the mouse, and that's going to put them up here at the very, very front. Now what we want to do is click on the first run up at the front here, so just this one, and come to our properties packs and change our stitch length from 3 to 4. Now this is just a placement stitch, so we don't need it to be that tight. So we're going to actually make it stitch out a little faster by changing it to 4 millimeters. And we're going to go ahead and click apply. We're going to come down to our second one now, and the first thing we need to do is change the color, because what we want to happen is after it stitches out this placement line, we want it to stop, so it will allow us to put our batting down and then allow us to start up again. The way we're going to do that is to tell it to be a different color so the machine stops. So we're going to use this red color here. So I'm going to come down to my color palette and click red. When I do that, you see that now I've got that red color in the design. And we want to change this to more of a tack down stitch from a regular stitch. So what we're going to do is come to our properties, and we're going to change it from a single run into a motif stitch. And we're going to change the style of motif to style 205, which is that cross stitch. And we are going to change now both our run and our size to 7 millimeters. So by changing our size to 7 millimeters, we get a bigger pattern. And by changing our run spacing, it's actually going to put 7 millimeters of space in between, because we don't really need it to be that tight of a pattern for our tack down. So when I click apply, you can see now I've got a nice wide pattern here for that. Now what we need to do is we need to take this stitch that we just created and change its size just a little bit. So we're going to come over here to our transform tab, and it should already be selected. First thing you want to do is uncheck maintain aspect ratio. And so what we want to do is uncheck that, because we're going to change our width and our height independently here. We want them both to be 5.8. So they're pretty close, but I'm going to change that to 5.8, and I'm going to change this one to 5.8, or 6.8 rather, and I'm going to go ahead and click apply. So it's going to make it just a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to come down to my last item in the sequence view and click it. I'm going to come back to my transform tab, and this one I want to increase to be both 5.6 and 6.6. So I'm going to put in a 5.6 here and a 6.6 here and click apply. And now we've got those elements resized correctly. The next thing we want to do is we want to, with that last item selected, come over here to our left-hand toolbar and again click the shape tool. And what we're going to do right now is we are going to create a hole in this square. So right now this is a square stitch, there's a rectangle stitch that goes all the way around, and we're going to create a hole in here so that we can turn this design inside out. So this stitch, this last stitch, this is going to stitch our top fabric down over the top of our design, but we want to leave a gap in here so that we can turn it inside out. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to take this tool, our shape tool, and hover over near this line. And I'm going to use this stitch right here as a guideline. So you want to come up to the 1, 2, 3 stitches up, and you want to right click on it and click split line. And what that's going to do is it's going to split this shape right here. We're going to do the same thing 1, 2, 3 down from here. So we're going to right click here and say split line again. And now because we've split it twice, we've actually created 3 different run stitches. We've got this one here and the one that goes around the outside. So what we want to do is click on the one in the center, which is our gap, and since we don't want that to stitch, we're going to delete that. We're going to come up, do that by coming up here and clicking the delete icon. And what we want to do now is click both of these. So I want to click on the last run here. So I want to select this top item here because I want to select both of these sets of stitches. And I'm going to change it from a single run into a double run to get a little bit better stitch. And I'm going to change this into a 2.5 millimeter to give it a little extra strength. So both of those are going to give us a stronger stitch around the edge here because it's going to become the edge we turn around inside out against. And I'm going to go ahead and click apply. The next thing we need to do is we need to make sure that this stitching starts and stops in the right place. And since we converted a square into different sets of stitches, it's not automatically going to do that for us. So what we're going to do is we are going to select the first run, which is the top one here in our last set of objects here, come back to our shape tool, and what you'll see here is a red dot which says this is where the stitching is going to end, and a green dot, this is where the stitching is going to begin. Now if this was just a single stitch, this would probably be what we wanted, but it's not what we want. Since this is a double run, we want it to start here and end here. So we're just going to take this icon right here and drag it all the way over back to the beginning. So now this stops and starts at the top there. And we're going to do the same thing with the bottom one, and going to click it. We're going to come back and select our shape tool, and this time our start icon is way down here. Our end is already in the right place, so I'm just going to drag it back over here, back up to the beginning, and let off the mouse, and I can either just click or right click to tell it I'm done, and it locks that change in. So once we've got all of that done, we now need to add some stippling in here to our design around the edge of the bird. To do that, we need to do some things to create a hole in the shape of the bird. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to come over to our sequence view, and over here we've got our gunmetal gray here, which is a little box with the bird around it. We're going to click the little plus icon here to expand it so we can see all of the items, and we are going to click this run stitch here that looks like the shape of the bird. So this is a run stitch in the shape of the bird, and what we're going to do is we are going to create an outline around the edge of this, an artwork outline. And the way we do that is we come up here to this tool, which is our Create Outlines tool, and click it. And it's going to probably show 5 for you. What you want to do is change this ripples down to 1. You want to make sure your spacing is at 0. You want to make sure that Cascade is checked, and these two want to be unchecked. And so what we're going to do is go ahead and click OK. And this is going to create a new artwork object down here at the bottom of our sequence view, which is an outline. Again, this is artwork, so it won't stitch around the outside of our bird. So what we're going to do is come up to our first item in the sequence view, which is this one right here. And we are going to make some copies of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to click copy and paste to get a copy of it. It's automatically going to put it down here at the bottom for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Control and click on the gunmetal gray here, bird. So I've got these two things selected, and I'm going to actually click on my combine icon. And when I do that, what it's going to do is create a brand new object in the outside shape of this run with a hole in the middle in the shape of the bird. So if I click that, that's going to happen. You see I've got a brand new object here with that hole in the center there. And when I fill it with a stippling stitch, you'll be able to see that the hole is really there. So now that that is selected, we're going to come over here to our advanced stippling, one click here, and click it, and it is going to bring up a dialog showing us all of the available options. We're going to use stipple number 28, so that's this one right here. So I'm going to click on that, and you'll see that it put this all the way around here. Stipple number 28. We're going to come over here to our stitch length and increase it to 3 millimeters and click apply. And lastly, what we want to do is change the color of it. So we're going to use this slate blue color right here. So I'm going to click on that, and it's going to make it a slate blue color. And you can see how the stippling stitch put a nice pattern in around the outside, but it's not going to go underneath our bird. All that we need to do now is change the order that this is going to stitch out in. We want this to stitch out right before our bird tack down stitch. So the way we're going to do that is click and drag this up here to this run right above where we want it to be, and click, and it will drop down right where we want it to be. So this is going to stitch first and then this. Now all we need to do is save this as a WAV file, and again in your machine format. So the way we're going to do that is come up here and we're going to click File, Save As, and I'm going to go ahead and put it in this folder, and what I'm going to do is name it Final applique tissue holder, and I'm going to leave the stitches on there and click Save. And so that's going to save it as a brand new file. And I'm going to save it one more time in my machine format. So now I'm going to again come here and click File, Save As. And in that same folder, what I'm going to do now is change it to PES version 9. And now I can actually take the stitches part of that name off of it, since I know a PES file is always going to be stitches. So what I've got is final applique tissue holder stitches.pes, and click Save. And now I'm ready to start constructing my design. So that ends the software portion of this lesson. So let's start constructing our project. And before we do that, let's go over the materials that you're going to need. You're going to need some Floriani nylon no-show mesh stabilizer, some Floriani Applique Wonder or Quilter Select Applique. That's our applique material. You can use either the roll or the sheet. You're going to need some Floriani embroidery batting. You'll need thread. We recommend Floriani embroidery thread for the top and Quilter Select Paracotton poly bobbin thread for the bobbin. You'll want to choose colors that work well with your fabric choices. You'll need a 5.5 inch by 6.5 inch or 140 millimeter by 170 millimeter or larger hoop size. And also nice to have will be an R&K precision turning tool. For fabric, you're going to need one 6 by 7 inch piece for the outside, one 6 by 7 inch piece for the lining, one 3 inch by 4 inch piece for the bird body, one 3 inch by 4 inch piece for the wings, and lastly, one 1.5 inch square piece for the beak. So next you'll want to prepare your fabric. First you'll want to cut a piece of embroidery batting to exactly 5.5 by 6.5 inches. Next you'll want to fuse your applique wonder or applique to the wrong side of the fabric for the beak, the wing, and the body pieces. If you're cutting manually, you want to print or trace the outlines to the paper side before fusing. Be sure to remember to print or trace them in reverse because they'll end up being on the back side. And lastly, you'll want to pre-cut the bird, body, wing, and beak pieces. And if cutting with a digital cutter, you'll want to use the generated or provided cut files. Stick the pieces down to the mat. Be sure to leave the release paper in place, then do your cutting. An important note before we embroider: most of the color changes in this design are there to make the machine stop between the steps, but you have the option of leaving the same thread in or changing it as desired. But if you have a multi-needle machine, be sure and use the machine controls to insert the stop commands to make the machine stop between the color changes. Otherwise, it's just going to go on and keep stitching and you won't be able to put your fabric and batting down. So first thing you're going to want to do is load the final applique tissue holder design into your machine. Hoop up a piece of Floriani nylon no-show mesh stabilizer, get it nice and tight. Attach the hoop to the machine and stitch out the first color, which will be the placement line for the batting. Next you'll want to center the batting within the placement lines and stitch the next color to tack down the batting. It helps to gently hold that batting in place while stitching, and a stiletto, a chopstick, pencil, something like that's good to do that. Don't use your fingers. Next you'll want to center your outside fabric over the batting and go ahead and stitch the next color, which will be the placement lines for both the bird sections and also to tack down the fabric. Next you'll want to remove the hoop from the machine, but do not unhoop the design. You'll want to remove the release paper from the back of your bird sections and then carefully place those bird sections within the placement lines, and then press with a hot iron to secure them and then return the hoop to the machine. Now if you want to, you can change the thread color for the stippling stitches and then go ahead and stitch that next color to actually create the stippling stitches. Once again, you may want to change the thread color because now we're going to stitch the cover stitches that go around the edge of the applique pieces of the bird. Go ahead and start up that next color to stitch those stitches. Next you'll want to center the lining fabric over the design with the right sides together. So the right side of the fabric is going to be down facing the design that's already in the hoop. Last step of the embroidery is to stitch out the next color, which is going to stitch the lining to the design. It's not real important what thread color you use here because it's going to be hidden. And then lastly, you want to remove the design from the hoop. Next, you'll want to trim the design to 6 by 7 inches, except at the opening or the gap there. You'll want to leave a little excess fabric and stabilizer at the gap to make folding the back inside a little bit easier. So in this picture you can see a little bit easier what I was just talking about, leaving some excess at the gap there. Next, you'll want to turn the design inside out and push out the corners with an R&K precision turning tool. Tuck that excess fabric to the inside and press it real good, and then stitch a seam along the side with the open edge to close the gap. Next, we're going to fold the top and bottom side inwards towards the center, and the folds want to go towards the lining, so towards the inside, and then you want to fold it in the direction that you see the arrows here, and then press it. If you have it folded correctly, it should look like this, with the outside having the bird on it and the inside two flaps should come together in the center. Next, you'll want to sew the sides shut, and you want to sew close to the edges, and you want to repeat that seam at least twice to give it a nice bit of strength. And for some extra pizzazz, you might want to use an R&K Swarovski Hot Fix crystal for the eye of the bird, or you can use a bead or a button. All that remains is to fill it with some tissues and enjoy it. You might want to make a lot more to give as gifts, and don't forget to make one for each one of your cars. So that completes our project for this month. I want to thank you all for attending and watching this video. We hope you'll use this video along with the printed PDF instructions to recreate the project at home. Come back next month for our next project.